Aloha mai kako. Welcome to this morning's practitioner session titled Ho'opono Ho'ola, presented by Meleanna Meyer and Dr. Martina Kamaka. You're in the right place. Thank you so much for joining us today. And my name is Krista Nielsen, and with me is Eden Carney. We will be your facilitators for today's session. And now it is my pleasure to tell you a little bit about our two amazing presenters. So Meleanna Aululi Meyer comes from a well-respected Hawaiian family and is a mother of 2 grown children and 4 mo'opuna. Her lifelong commitment to the arts fulfills a passion and vocation to teach others about the arts and its importance in the lives of children and adults alike. An alumna of Punahou School, Meleanna received numerous awards, both for scholastic accomplishments and civic engagement while there. She received her Bachelor's of Arts in Design and Photography from Stanford University, winning the prestigious Borelli Arts Prize for Excellence. She received her Master's in Educational Foundations from the College of Education, University of Hawaiʻi at Manoa, and was the first recipient of the Lama Kū Award for Community Service. An East-West Center Fellow and Award grantee, she was actively engaged in the Center's Arts and Cultural Department throughout the years. Meleanna has been a commissioner for the Meyer's Commission on Arts in Honolulu, served in various capacities as juror and readers for numerous organizations, and served on the Kennedy Center's National Governance Committee for Arts Education and in ongoing capacities on various boards and arts organizations in Hawaii. As an independent contractor and consultant, she has worked with numerous programs throughout the state, particularly with the AITS program through the DOE for the past 35 years, serving as a teaching artist instructor to numerous charter schools and immersion programs, as well as past adjunct instructor in the arts at the College of Education at the University of Hawaii Manoa. Meleanna has received many honors for her work as a documentary filmmaker and a published author. Welcome, Meleanna. Dr. Martina Lealoha Kamaka is a Native Hawaiian family physician and associate professor in the Department of Native Hawaiian Health at the University of Hawaii Manoa John A. Burns School of Medicine. She is a graduate of Kamehameha Schools, the University of Notre Dame, and the John A. Burns School of Medicine. She completed her family medicine residency in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Her professional interests lie in the area of cultural competency training, as well as Native Hawaiian and indigenous health. She is currently a vice chair of NCAPIP, the National Council of Asian Pacific Islander Physicians, as well as a founder and board member of the Ahahui o Nā Kauka, Association of Native Hawaiian Physicians, and the Pacific Region Indigenous Doctors Congress. Aloha, Meleanna and Dr. Kamaka. We are so honored to have this time with you this morning to learn about a really wonderful and important collaboration that you, Meleanna, as an artist and teacher, have in the sense pioneered with Dr. Kamaka, an advocate and educator of Native Hawaiian physicians. So, and as we have heard in your introductions, your journey to this work together kind of started out in a very traditional westernized system. So we'd like to maybe learn a little bit about how, having been trained in a westernized system, what was the process for you in developing your practice as a Kanaka, embracing your Hawaiian culture, and then working in community?
Hello, my kako. It is a real pleasure to be with you all and to have the privilege and opportunity to be with my dear colleague, Dr. Kamaka. She's a dear friend. Our families know each other, as many in our community do, serving the community. I just wanted to take a moment to help you all think about the title of the presentation. It's Ho'ola, actually Ho'opono, and then Ho'ola. Ho'o is like this activating principle that if you put in front of words for us in our language, it activates things. So it's kind of interesting that the HCBE, as in culture-based education, has turned into a P for this year, as in practice, because that is indeed what Ho'o does. It causes that next word to become active. So we're actually going to be speaking a little bit about Ho'opono, things to help us to make right, and also things like the arts, the medical arts, and the visual arts to bring balance and to activate our lives. So it's really important to speak of that. And as we've been asked with our Western training, how that's influenced and how we've returned or whatever to our cultural practices, it's important to know that this conversation really is about both. And it's not about us at this point in our lives anyway. And I know Martina feels very much the same. It's for us to choose. So this whole conversation is to affirm that we have chosen to use both, because we can't be doing the work we do without the complement of both. And it's not an either or, which is why that's really important to bring up. And the word "and" is brought up for me because I have refocused and reshifted, coming back to the islands years ago, because our training was very exclusive in that sense and very individualistic, which is good if you want to if you want to be famous or something. But if you want to be in community, the most important things are to be inclusive, collaborative, to be a good listener, to be able to work with others well. So those are all cultural values that I hold dear to me. And this notion of coming from one place to another, I just want us all to know that the mo'olelo for today is Ho'omalamalama ke au I kana'au, and it translates to the world enlightens the mind. And I want to bring that point up because of necessity. I've had to work to reclaim all of this ʻIke Hawaii because I wasn't raised with it per se. I wasn't fluent in the language. I'm taking the language now as a student at my age. We were taught French. I learned Italian. I'm happy with learning those things, but I'm really grateful to be learning my Olelo Makuahine Kia Manava. So I believe that the work Martina and I have been able to do together is to really understand this notion of Waiwai for us, which is the things that are precious. And the things that are precious for me are all of these practices that I've been able to embrace that have to do with culture, that have to do with relationship, that have to do with pilina, that have to do with na'au and piko. These are all words that are about relationship, about being balanced, about understanding not only your language and your culture, because all of it has to do with your health. So in terms of Martina and I, my privilege is to be able to work with a colleague in the medical profession to help others understand that our work is not siloed, nor should it ever be. So that's been the privilege of coming to understandings through medicine, through history, through education, and most certainly through the arts, where we can share with you all today. And hopefully tomorrow, those of you guys who want to join us. So for that, I'll stop there. Thanks, Martina.
Okay, so I trained, as you heard, here at the John A. Burns School of Medicine. And at the time I trained, medicine was advocating for treating patients in a colorblind kind of way. So they said, treat everybody the same, we'll deliver, quality care. And then I went away for my training. And in fact, I stayed on the continent for a couple of years in practice before coming back home. And when I came back, so growing up, I come from a family kind of associated with music. So Hawaiian music, hula, that was very much. But we didn't, most of us didn't speak the language. We didn't do a lot of other kind of cultural practices, some around food, of course. So I went away and I came back home, and my last name is Kamaka. And all of a sudden I had a lot of patients that were Native Hawaiian coming in to see me. And I realized very quickly that they expected me to know things that I didn't know. And a lot of it had to do with cultural. So I realized that there was a lot that I had to learn. I was very fortunate that Dr. Emmett Aluli and Dr. Kekuni Blaisdell reached out to me as they were trying to form an association of Native Hawaiian physicians. And particularly as we gathered up the young physicians, many of them felt like I did. We were trained very Western. We didn't feel connected necessarily deeply to our culture. And we were feeling like somebody help us, right? And so this organization formed, and that was the beginning of my journey in sort of rediscovering my culture to a deeper level. And then I began teaching at JABSOM. I've been teaching there for about 20 years. And realizing that as I worked with Dr. Blaisdell and Dr. Aluli, that we had huge Native Hawaiian health disparities, which I wasn't aware of. I wasn't taught them in medical school. And it was like, oh my goodness, we have a lot of work to do. And then I come to the medical school and I realize that, I'm working with another wonderful Native Hawaiian kauka, Dr. Ben Young, and he's like, many of the faculty have no idea about our Native Hawaiian health disparities, so how can we expect our students to learn about this? So this started my journey on, how do we teach about disparities in cultures at a medical school? And it was through this journey that there was a lot of personal growth. So I have to say that as much as I reached out to the community for help in teaching, our students, they were also teaching me. And so I'm just so honored for their ʻIke, their aloha, their for our students and wanting to make a difference. So that's kind of my story about, how I sort of connected back to this realization that my culture was important not only to me, but to my people, and to make a difference in our health. So, yeah.
Maybe I don't know. We can talk about how we met, my dear. Maybe that'd be kind of
Okay.
fun. Yeah.
Well, we actually met because my kids were in the Hawaiian language immersion system in Punana, and Kekula Kaya Puni. They were at Kekulo, Samuel, Manaya, Kaleni, Kamakau. And they were involved in art, and they had art there. And there was Meleanna and Meyer. And of course, Meleanna comes from a very well-known family. You heard Aluli's in her middle name. I knew Emmett. So it was actually this connection of family that initially connected us. And so I don't know, Meleanna, did you want to add any more?
No,
to that?
I want to let everyone know that that's actually what it is all about. This notion of practice. It's actually applying those values and things that are really commonplace and common sense in many places everywhere. It's about relationship. And then when this mural piece, which you'll be seeing shortly, was completed, Martina, that's again when we met each other another time. So maybe we can talk about the mural, because people will really understand then this notion of ho'opono and then ho'ola. So that'd be great.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead now and start our presentation. And what I wanted to do when I talk about our presentation is sort of set the stage for that relationship and what happened from that. So I think in order to do that, we really need to sort of understand what was happening at the medical school and within medicine. So if you'll just bear with me, I want to focus on just setting the stage first. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to sort of give you an illustration or example of potential and how we did it. And it was really utilizing visual art in our curriculum as we try to address cultural trauma and healing. But first of all, just kind of quickly, I'm going to go over with you sort of what motivated some of this work in the med school, trying to get the medical students to understand what cultural trauma is and health disparities and how they're related, and then how we brought visual arts into the curriculum. So I'm going to go very quickly. I spend a lot more time with my medical students going into detail, but that's not why you're here. But I just wanted to set the stage. So I'm going to start the slideshow at this point. And hopefully everybody can see this.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Okay. So what I do is I always start with my students. Not the majority of our students are not Native Hawaiian. And so I always start by, and sometimes you have to sort of justify why you're focusing in on one particular group. And so for me, I always have to sort of explain, why are we focusing on Native Hawaiian health? As you all know, we're very unique, right? We're the most diverse state in the country, and only 21% of our population is white. But what's interesting about us is, although most of us are mixed race as Native Hawaiians, we identify, 93% of us identify very highly with our Hawaiian ancestry. So I make sure that the students understand that. We're also a very young and growing population, but yet we have huge health disparities. So I'm just going to give you a quick snapshot of our disparities, which many of you may know. We have the lowest life expectancy of the 5 major ethnic groups in Hawaii. We have the highest prevalence rates of coronary artery disease and strokes, highest mortality and breast cancer for women, and lung and colon cancer for both women and men. We have the highest rates of obesity. We have among the highest rates of diabetes. There are other ethnic groups that are trying to compete with us for that designation, and we have the highest poverty. So this is really important that the students understand that, and they get that throughout their curriculum in different ways. But I want to make sure that they start with a basic understanding. And then I need to explain, why are we talking about this, and what is the role, for example, cultural competency or sensitivity or humility training. I realize that's a loaded term for many people, and we explain that to the students as well. But we know that there are health disparities in this country. We know that many minority groups receive lower quality care. And this study is really critical. This is the 2002 Institute of Medicine report, because it said these things exist in spite of access. So it's not all access. You can't blame it on the decreased number of physicians in these communities or decreased amount of health insurance. There are more things going on. And what they found out was that stereotyping biases and uncertainty by providers are contributing to these disparities. So this is so important for me when I talk to our medical students, that they understand that they're part of the problem. And that's why we have to really think about how we train our students if we really want to get rid of these disparities. And they also said that in order to understand these disparities, you have to understand the context of history and social and economic inequality, social determinants of health, cultural determinants of health. Those are all really critical terms and concepts that the students need to understand. So then what I do with the students is I do some more, just why are we doing this? Well, if you want to be accredited as a medical school in this country, you have to check in the boxes for all these things. And this is one of their standards called cultural competence and healthcare disparities. So it's also not only understanding the disparities and the origin and trying to eliminate those disparities, it's also this self-awareness piece. What are my own biases? How is that contributing to this? And then they say, understand the impact of these disparities and methods to eliminate. I argue that you cannot eliminate health disparities if you don't understand the origins of them. It's like slapping a Band-Aid on a wound. If you don't understand the bacteria that's causing that wound to fester, you'll never get rid of the wound. So we actually need to go much deeper than what this requires. I have what I call Hawaiian History 101, and I usually do this, and I have anywhere between an hour and an hour and a half. So I'm not going to go over this in detail with you, but I want to give you a flavor of the things we cover. So I start with, the origins of Polynesians and Native Hawaiians and how we got to our homeland. And I talk about the strengths of our culture in particularly in the science of wayfinding, which is a science. It's definitely a science. And then I talk about, by the time Cook arrives in 1778, our best estimates, there are about 685,000 Native Hawaiians living in these lands. And then I tell them, well, what did Hawaiians look like? They just got exposed to all these health disparities. What did Hawaiians look like when Cook landed? It wasn't what that we have now. They describe us as being very healthy. We're above middle size, capable of great fatigue. If you're into public health, you understand what it means when somebody talks about good health, good dental health. That's a reflection of your inner health. They even mentioned that we had good teeth. So we know that we were really healthy people. And then I talk about how we were really closely connected with the land and we were amazing resource managers. For example, water, the management of water was so important that the water at the mouth, up in the mountains, that healthy, fresh water, that quality of water had to be just as healthy at the bottom for the people that lived at the bottom. And we talk about the trade and you were a fisherman, you traded for what you needed for the people that were growing kalo. So I spend some time talking about that. Then we spend time talking about understanding the Hawaiian view of wellness. Again, I may be talking to the choir, but for the medical students, most of them are not Native Hawaiian. I think this is important. So this holistic idea of health, the balance between mind, body, spirit, that's probably not new. You hear that a lot. But what makes indigenous health different is this macro level where it's really spirituality underlies everything. But then it's that connection, that balance to family and your community and your ʻāina, your land, your environment. So all of this had to be in balance, personal, micro level, mind, body, spirit, but also your relationship with family, community, your ʻāina, and your gods. That had to be in balance. And then you have wellness. So when Cook landed, this is what he found, okay? So what happened? So I have to explain what happened from that to all these horrible health disparities that we have. So I call it Hawaiian History After Colonization, or Understanding the Role of Loss. And I start with this slide from Dr. Kūpuna Blaisdell, shared this slide very widely. And what you can see is a very precipitous, devastating decline in the Native Hawaiian population. So the red arrow is that 685. That's, there have been estimates of anywhere from 450,000 to 800,000 Native Hawaiians, but I think most experts agree now it's somewhere around 685,000. So that's why I put that red arrow. So you can see this precipitous decline in our population. And then you can see the increase in the other groups that moved to Hawaiʻi later. So what's behind that? Well, the first thing, especially in a medical school, you talk about the impact of infectious diseases. So I like to show this slide that shows all the diseases that come in at the different times. But then, not only do we have diseases, we have huge social and cultural changes that happen with the impact of colonization. So I go through this slide and I go through each of the things on this slide, starting with the impact of change to capital, capitalism that first really reared its head for us with the sandalwood trade that happened around, 1810. And then we can't and then the overthrow of the kapu system. This was the system that regulated this was our social construct, our political construct, our religious construct. This is the way we understood the world. And when that was overthrown, the people are lost. You're at a loss. You're in a vacuum. This is when Christianity stepped in, actually. The vacuum was already there in Christianity. We talk about the Great Mahele and privatization of land, and what impact did that have on our people that didn't understand the concept of private land ownership or all the legal mumbo jumbo that you had to understand to buy land and have a lease on land, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, we spend quite a bit of time talking about that huge traumatic event of the overthrow of our monarchy and the loss of our own sovereignty. So I go through this with the students. And then I also end by showing how we become a minority in our own homeland. So by 1890, like a little over 100 years after after Cook arrives, we are a minority in our own homeland. Our population has decreased not over 90%, almost 95%, if not more. We're down to 37,000 Native Hawaiians, but we have double the amount of Japanese that have been brought in as workers. We have about 26,000 Chinese, the first group that was brought in to work on the sugar plantation. And whites numbered about 29,000. So here we are, and this is right before the overthrow. We've become a minority in our own land. So what does that mean? That means there's lots of conflict that's happening, right? We're this private property, communal subsistence, individualism versus collective, capitalism, private land ownership, exploiting national resources, to sharing and caring what we consider a sacred environment. Our plants are connected to our gods. They're the kino lau of our gods. I mean, this whole system is totally upended. So what we have is depopulation and minority. We lose our land, our culture is degraded, we lose our sovereignty, there's this conflict I just shared with you, there's despair, self-destruction, there's racism. We have lost our positive self-identity. We're heathens. There's shame in being Native Hawaiian. So we go through what is considered cultural historical trauma. Then I have to explain to the students, what is cultural historical trauma? Well, it's really an injury. It's a colonial injury. It's colonization. And it's a collective experience for a people. So you go through this trauma together, and it's cumulative effects, such as daily re-experiencing of trauma, but it's this cumulative effect of oppression and marginalization. But what's really key, it's cross-generational. So these impacts are felt in the next generation, in the next generation, in the next generation. It offers an explanation for inequities and health and well-being. So some of this work was initially done here. I skipped over that chart, so I'm going to go backwards a little, by our colleagues in the Native American community. Maria Yellowhorse Braveheart is a name that many people know about, talking about historical trauma, but actually she was looking at her work after seeing what was happening in the Holocaust and the trauma that would actually seem to be carried on in future generations. So you have your Holocaust generation, and then you have generations after that suffering increased amounts of depression and suicide. So, and this isn't just an indigenous thing. So I mentioned the Holocaust, but I just want to point out, I'm not going to go into this in detail, but the ACEs study that was done by Kaiser Permanente and the CDC in the 1998. And what they showed was, if you were a kid that was exposed to these traumas that you see here on the right, the more you were exposed to, the sicker you were as an adult. So, and it wasn't just depression or suicide or substance abuse that you might suspect. It was obesity and cancer and heart disease. So this actually starts making you think about, wow, what about the genetic blueprint? What about epigenetics, the changes that happen around your DNA code? These are all being impacted by this trauma. So I try to remind the students, this just isn't an indigenous problem. This is a problem that we see, and you can think about what's happening in our world right now and the traumas that our world is going through. So I summarize it with my students by saying, look at all the losses that Native Hawaiians have suffered. And these losses, they're intergenerational. The trauma gets carried on, the despair, the self-destruction, then we get these disparities, which leads to more trauma, and so it's this vicious cycle. So how do we fix it? So that was one of the things that challenged us at the Department of Native Hawaiian Health is, how do we talk about this? How do we fix it? So I just wanted to let you all know, if you're not familiar with our department at JAPSOM, that we were the first department of indigenous health in the entire country. There are now a few more, but we were the first in 2005. And when we started this work about thinking about, talking about cultural competency, quoting that, training and health disparities and healing from that, we actually realized that the answer wasn't within our medical profession. We needed help. So we actually have a very multidisciplinary team. They're not all physicians. They come from many fields. This is a small picture of us in the early days, but we've actually expanded quite a bit to involve much more community. And we realized we couldn't just teach this by lecture. There had to be an experiential learning component, because in order to really get people to understand trauma and health disparities and healing, it has to come from your heart. It can't come from your brain. You have to understand at this level, and that's where we need to have experiential learning. So I took you through really quickly what we do at JAPSOM as far as teaching about history. I have some thoughts about who needs to teach about this. We can talk about that later if anybody's interested. We do a group exercise trying to get them to understand loss. And then we need to talk about healing, because when we first started this curriculum, we kind of stopped at the health disparities and the trauma, and the students were devastated when they left. They were like, what can we do to fix this? And we were like, as Kuma, we're like, oh no, we can't do this to our students. So we realized we had to have a section on healing. And, as you look about healing from trauma, especially indigenous healing from trauma, there seem to be three essential ingredients: spirituality, inclusion of culture, particular cultural strengths, and then some kind of transformation or therapeutic change. So, you have to accept this history, you have to understand it, accept it, release it, and transcend it. That's part of your release. That's part of your release process. And for us as indigenous people, it's, we can't forget that interconnectedness. Remember those triangles, that and especially that connection to ʻāina. So, as faculty, we were going, okay, how are we going to demonstrate this? What is a nice, succinct way that we can demonstrate this? And so one of our team members is a social worker. She goes, hey, there's this beautiful video from the Alaska Native community called Car from the Heart, which talks about the suicide and substance abuse and their root, and just the years of trauma and disconnection for culture, and an effort by one man to bring back a cultural practice, which is carving a totem, which they hadn't done in that community for 300 years. Beautiful story. If any of you get to watch it, I highly recommend it. So our students watched it and they got it, and then they were like, yeah, but isn't there anything like this happening in the Hawaiian community? And right around this time, one of our faculty came back from a meeting and said, oh my goodness, there's this amazing mural being shown at Mark's Garage that I think really speaks to what we're trying to talk to the students about. It's called the Aloha ʻāina mural. And ʻāina aloha kalamai. The ʻāina aloha mural. And what it does, it's a two-sided mural, and it depicts cultural trauma on one side and healing on the other. And it was like, oh my goodness, we have to all go see it. So the faculty, we all made it over to Mark's garage. And sure enough, I get there, and who should I run into but Meleanna? And I'm like, Meleanna, this is perfect. We need to figure out how to bring this to the medical school. And I talked to her, and Meleanna got really, really excited. And so this was the start of our collaboration. I'm proud to say that in 2016, we brought the mural to the medical school. This is the mural, the ʻAina Aloha mural, sitting in the lobby at JABSM, I should say, being displayed in the lobby at JABSM. It was there for about 3 months. And yes, we were able to integrate it into the curriculum. And I am now going to turn this over to Meleanna.
Mahalo, my dear. It's such a wonderful mo'olelo that you've shared. And as we go, are we going to be sharing also the photos at all that are coming?
Yes, so I have the video next. So you just let me know when you want to start the video. That'll be right after this slide.
Okay, good. Because what you need to know, folks, in our world, there is so much suffering. So as creatives, there are 6 of us who worked on this project. And typically I work all over the place. So I work with different teams of students and teachers, etc. But for this mural, I didn't want the young ones to work on it because of the baggage, because of all the cultural trauma. And what's interesting, this doesn't look like trauma, but underneath this mural is the trauma that we painted away. So it's really important that you know that from this work, the beauty of our mo'olelo, our ka'au, have come. And we start on the right-hand side, and I'll give you a translation of that, maybe either later today or tomorrow, depending. But it's important for you to know that the transformation, as Martina talked about, in terms of 3 things, right? Spirituality, cultural awareness, and integration. But for me, the transformation also came in the work of the mural, because as a creative, it's not like you know all the answers ever, and everything changes. So we're in this process doing this mural for a week. We've painted out the pain. I did this, and we're all done, and let's move on. But the younger ones in the group said, no, but we're not done with the pain yet. And I said to myself, no, wait a minute. We're done. We painted it over. As one of the older ones in the group was in charge of this, right? So I said, no, we're done. And I'm ready to walk away. And the younger ones are going, oh, no. We're gonna do something more. And I said, don't tell me we're going to paint the other side. And so we painted the other side. So what's incredibly important that you all need to know is we typically, all of us, humankind, we move away from the pain. We painted this pain away underneath, as you'll see in this video, but it doesn't go away that easily. So the metaphor and the information and the realization for all of us here is that, okay, then we turn towards the pain again. But this way, we're more informed, we're learning our history, we're bringing in our culture, and we're coming to understand, just as Martina spoke of, what the pain looks like and then how to make it go away. So the transformation is that pain is universal, and that what you're experiencing on this side of the mural is our story, as in a Hawaiian story. If I was with my brothers and sisters in Arizona, the colors would be golds and browns and yellows. But because we are Pacific people, we have the blues and the greens. And you'll see that those identifiers throughout this presentation, and again when we work again tomorrow. And you'll begin to understand our story better, and that the noʻeau for us also is our seat of intelligence, and that is where our 6th sense comes in. It's our noʻeau, it's our intuition, it's our and it's in our gut. So I just want you to know that that's where it comes from. So when you see this next piece, we'll have this great conversation about this puli, or this ao pula pula, which we're in right now, which is a changing time. So yeah, let's see that video. I think it's an important piece. And also, there are people in this video who are really important, like Mapuana Olds. So we have my beloved friends who are doing oli and adding to this. So it's a complete piece because it's all about community doing the work. I just wanted to share. Thank you. Can we increase the volume at all and give it full screen or something? And it says from ignorance. In other words, from out of ignorance. Okay. Yeah, sorry. Let's try that again. Sorry. So it's not from ignorance, but it's from out of.
I need to turn the volume up. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's try it. If the volume's not good, then stop me and I'll do it again.
Okay. It was hard to translate, but just read it. And if you have questions, mai kapo mai kaʻoiaʻiʻo, meaning from out of our ignorance to education and light. Thank you.
Better?
Yeah, we just need to full screen it.
Sorry. I'm not sure I can make it larger, Meleanna.
That's okay. That's okay, dear. It's okay.
Start with self. Start with family. Whatever that is that comes out of this, we're adding another dialogue to our culture and our commitment
And as you're watching, I just want to let you know that we're a team that works well together because we honor. Oh, let's keep going. Don't. Oh, I see. Stop. Okay.
And then we'll see where it This is the disease part.
If there was one event that had probably the most maddening of things would have been this disease, because it was this affirmation. Oh, of course we're doing something wrong and we're being cursed, or whatever. It's like how can you get around something that's killing you and you can't see it?
What we're doing is we're putting in our leʻau back. So the pain is underneath this. It's part of the living and the dying part.
It's like it is. It's like a sonic negative space. Each circle is intensive energy in this space. It's silence. These represent the silence between each of the major shapes.
So one thing that's so important to understand too is this was going to be the outreach for a film that I've been working on for years. And instead, believe it or not, it has become the engine of Kuʻaina Aloha. Kuʻaina Aloha translates to beloved land, and it's that land that loves us. So we're turning the conversation instead of from Aloha ʻāina, which are protectors of the land, who love the land, we're saying this land loves us. And in the conversation between Martina and I, it became apparent that this depth of understanding about land is something that is foundational to Hawaiian culture. We love our land because it is that which feeds us. So ʻāina isn't just land. It doesn't translate as land. That's the literal. But the kauna of ʻāina is that which feeds you. So in terms of education and practice and application, this whole notion of being in the land, farming the land, taking care of the land is kind of like the mentality or the ʻIke, the wisdom that we want to share with our children. So that is indeed why it's a practice for both of us. We are practitioners in our own areas of professional study, but as cultural practitioners, this notion of understanding that the land is our mother is important, because then you can take care. You don't want to rape and pillage your mother. You don't want to extract. You don't want to take things from the land if she is your mother that way. Well, all you want to do is care. So for us, it's really become also a metaphor for how we treat each other. And then what did we do after this, Martina? Yeah, just take a moment and read this. I mean, I don't need to read something that's on a screen, but just take a quiet moment to read this. And as you read that, I can share that Martina and I, with the students for the last 5 years, we've had some opportunity to do some very compelling exercises with them that have left them really deeply thinking about this kind of work as an opportunity for also them to heal, because this is not just a Hawaiian issue. This is a complex issue, particularly for the history in Hawaii, because when you know it, you know that we're not just talking about Hawaiians. Hawaii in the 1840s and such, it was a multinational place. So it was a country that allowed for not just Hawaiians, but people from all over the world. So, you know, when people say to us, both Martina and I, oh, why are you folks so interested in Hawaiian community issues? Hello, if our communities were in better health, if they had better education, then we wouldn't be so focused. But because there's such need today, of course we want to do that. Of course, that is our main, it is our kuleana, to tell you. So I just want to thank my colleague again, because she believes in the work, as so do I. So we've been doing these projects together, these presentations with Aboriginal cultures as far as Australia, New Zealand. I've done work on the continent as well in Arizona. So the work is not just about cultural healing, but just healing in general from all of this trauma, generational and loss. And it's a lot of work for us to do. So that's why we're gonna spend time tomorrow to do some work with you all as well. Because this is the other side of the mural, folks. This is what was created. So it's meant to engage you all in an understanding of all of these things as a multiplicity. Nothing is siloed. Everything's moshed together. And when you understand that, it affects not only your body, but your soul, your spirit, the generations to come after you. Then it becomes this complex, extraordinary story that needs to be untangled. So the next slide, I think, is a slide of the mural together as it goes together. So you can see the other side. And I think the next slide is Kalo and the Ki'i and our creation mythology at the bottom right. And Kalo is our older brother, Haloa Nakalau Kapalili. And tomorrow we'll learn more about him. The next slide is about our Kūpuna mountains, our ancestors, our wisdom traditions from the past. As we go into the next slide, which is focusing on spirit. And it's smack dab in the middle of the mural, which when you trained in a Western context, they tell you don't do that. But then you learn the rules and then you get to break them, right? That's the deal. Okay, so spirit holds us not only from above, but below. Everything has energy and sentience. So this is not unusual languaging to hear today, because our Buddhist brothers and sisters, our Hindu brothers and sisters, Hawaiians are animists. We believe in life being animated throughout. So through the next slide, you'll see these are umeke. These are little bowls like this that hold our traditions. And it's beautiful because it's the language, it's the cultural protocols. And those little kites over there are oli. They're little chants that I figured, well, what does an oli look like? Well, to me, it looks like a kite because you're sending it up to heaven. So it's kind of a cool thing. And this next piece is of the mural is of our practices. And these are a remembering and a reclaiming and a returning to our cultural practices that we do at Pukohala, we do in many places on our islands. And this last slide has to do with our keiki, the next generation. Anyone, you know, that's my mo'opuna with the suntan, but because he's Swedish, German, Irish, English, French, Chinese, and Hawaiian. So, and the hand image, the handpiece that the Kūpuna hand is holding happens to be an avatar or an unformed image. It's not finished. So that is for that generation of children, the next generation coming to do the work. And as we continue, I think this next slide is a universal understanding of pain. But what's so beautiful in the next slide, you'll see a detail which has to do with these hands in the mural. So they're both coming to help and being helped. And it doesn't matter what culture, it matters that our humanity is doing the work together. And this last piece for this is really beautiful because it shows you these little tessellations within the red pain piece, and that is of education and of healing. So I honor Carl Powell because he said to me, I said, didn't you get the memo? This is supposed to be pain. And he goes, but you asked us to bring the healing from the other side of the mural into this work. And it's so deep because a tessellation is also it's the building block in engineering and in biology, if I'm not mistaken. It's a very strong block, a structure, the triangle, what is it? Tetrahedron. And Buckminster Fuller used it. And so it just represents for us our strengthening, our understanding, our reclaiming our history. So these pieces are really important to share like this, and we'll share more tomorrow, as I say. And the last piece, Martina, is what? What do we have? Oh, it's the mural, the first side. So just know that this has been an exploration for not only myself and our team of remarkable friends and colleagues, but for Martina and those I've worked with at the medical school, it's been my privilege to help them understand the cultural importance and the continuity that needs to come today to help our youth understand their identity so that they can work towards wellness. If you don't know who you are, you're just going to follow any old buddy and any old thing. And we just don't want that. We want our children to find the ho'opono, in the healing, their ho'ola, their life, their livelihood, and their passion so that they can go forward. It's a very exciting and profound experience that I've had with Martina. And I think the last slide is what, my dear? Oh, please.
So what did this look like at Jabsum? So we were privileged to actually have the mural, and now you can get a sense of how large it is. I think we forgot to mention it's 20 feet across and 6 feet tall. It's huge, and so you kind of get a sense of that. So what we actually had the students do, they saw the video, we discussed it. They had they had preceding the talk about history and trauma and healing. And then what we asked them to do, and this is going to be something like what's going to happen tomorrow, is we asked them to engage with aspects of each side of the mural. As Meleanna said, trauma is a universal. Pain is something universal. It's not limited to Native Hawaiians. And so we asked them to engage with it, and then they had an art project that they needed to do, and I'm going to let Meleanna talk about that. But you can see my students sitting around, so we had to obviously divide them into groups. We have like 80 students, so they had to come down in groups, and they're sitting and with each side of the mural, and they could pick whichever part of the mural connected with them, so it was. So what was the impact of this exercise? So I just wanted to share with you some of the evaluations. So we had like 96% of them understood the importance of tools that could be used to heal from, sorry, there's a typo there, from cultural trauma. And I thought some of these quotes were really meaningful. They were able to link it to their personal lives, to themselves. They were able to understand that emotional healing is part of physical healing, and the importance of treating the spiritual healing, and that you have to treat the source, not the symptoms. And everybody has similar experience of pain, hurt, and healing. And they really felt like just doing this exercise helped them find new ways to relate to future patients. So, yay, that's what we're hoping to do in our medical curriculum. and that your background and your story matters as a physician. And if you can articulate that, you can build trust and improve how you treat. So these kind of changes hopefully will make a difference for our people in the future. So I have just a few more cool pictures. Meleanna, you want to talk about this?
Yeah, this is great. Just because people would say to me, but the pain is so traumatic. Well, the pain is traumatic for me for all sorts of reasons in my life. But if I was a kindergartner, the pain is, oh, I lost my cat, or I have a toothache or something. So this notion of you can't talk to children about pain is ridiculous, because they are the ones who seek understanding and knowledge. So they are the ones to speak. And so I've worked with kindergartners, and you just don't talk about a lot of the other stuff because that comes later. So the next slide also gives you a sense of, using the mural for different groups. So this incredible piece was up at the Bishop Museum, and we did we had an extraordinary opportunity to work in community through the Bishop Museum. So I taught classes, groups came through, and it was in connection to an exhibition called Unreal, how Hawaiians are seen in the world. So the Bishop Museum is that's a shout out for them. They are a really important cultural resource for us. And there are lots of really important groups and things going on today. But for Martina and I, this mural has given us great opportunity to not only understand each other's professions, but also to work together happily. It's been such a privilege. And what's the next slide? Let's see.
And we have our last slide.
Yeah, there we go. And this is the School of Kamaka, which is so wonderful. It's a beloved place where not only Martina's children went, but that I've enjoyed over the years and years doing creative work with the school population. And many of the murals we've done in town, whether at the Bishop Museum or the Convention Center or in Waikiki or in Kalihi, many of these extraordinary young youth have come from Kamaka. And that's to say that all of our children need art. They need the musical arts, the visual, the singing, the theatrical arts. We need arts, the healing arts. We need the arts to touch our souls, to bring forth our true beauty and expression in how we see it and how we relate to each other. So our work today is not finished, but we just wanted to take a moment and just thank Kamaka School as well. And if you have any questions, I think we have a couple minutes, right, or no?
Yeah.
Okay.
We do. I just want to really quickly add, as we kind of wrap up this sort of formal part, that in our teaching, we actually use the mini mural. So obviously we can't set this. Yeah, we can't set this 20 foot by 6 foot up every year when this comes up in our curriculum. So we actually have that's the mini mural.
That's the mini.
Yeah, so the mini mural is about half the size, so we can roll it up and then we can put it up on our big whiteboards and hang it up for the students so that they can still sort of get up and personal with it. And then when we have to, then we use the mini mural, which is quite a bit smaller. Meleanna showed, but so it's still we're still showing the mural, but unfortunately we can't show it in this large. It's actually most powerful large, but the mini murals, that's what we traveled with when we went to Australia and New Zealand, and it still has that impact, especially when you can come up and see the detail and really kind of look closely, because there's stuff you miss when you first look at it until you can kind of look closely at each part of it and see the story. But there's so many stories in there, so I just wanted to end with that.
Yay. If anyone has questions or comments, please put them in the chat. And it's something that we are grateful to share today. And Martina, we'll be doing more of the mural work tomorrow, and we'll be working with these.
Oh, yeah. I'm not done. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Again. Okay. Sorry about that.
No, not at all.
Okay. I have this slide and that slide, just so you know.
Ah, okay.
So tell me when you want me to show them.
Yeah, actually now is good because for tomorrow, what we're going to be doing is working in these little books. So those of you who want to join us, we will be talking about the mural, both from a health perspective and a cultural and art perspective. So this will be the directions that hopefully you'll get. And then the other slide is meant to show you what this little book here looks like when it's opened up. And the reason it's important for you to see it opened up is because it's used as a diagnostic. When it's together as a book, the kauna, the message I wanted to give you all is that we spend too much time on paper or on one level or plane. What we need to do is create our stories and offer the opportunity to actually make something dimensional. So this is what this piece is unfolded, and it's a diagnostic. You can say to your students, your participants, wow, it looks like you understood, and this is what we're going to go over tomorrow because it's too difficult within the short amount of time. But if those of you guys who have questions, we're here to answer them because we're excited that you joined us today. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's it for
I
our.
don't mind the chat's coming up disabled.
The chat's coming up. What?
It says chat disabled.
Oh, so maybe we'll just.
Yeah.
Can you enable that, or we'll just take, if you don't mind, unmuting yourself and asking a question. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Yes, we just enabled the chat. So sorry about that. And thank you so much for joining us. I dropped in the chat the directions to how to make the book. There's a link, and hopefully it will take you to those directions. Okay. And yes, so hopefully you have access to the chat now. If you have any questions for Meleanna and Dr. Kamaka, they're willing to chat. We have about 20 more minutes. So feel free if you would like to speak with our presenters. Thank you.
As you all are contemplating jumping in, please do. We'd love to speak with you, and just know that the work continues, and we all do work in different areas. So that's the important part, that we are able to be there for each other.
Meleanna, did you see that question?
Yeah, what a great question. Oh, what a great question. The question is guidance received by Aumakua. Oh my goodness, what a great question. Our Aumakua are, you can say they're spirit guides. They are spirit and form that are pilina connected to us. Aumakua are also, they have kinolau, different forms. If you're connected, they can manifest as animal forms like pueo, like mano, like, and you can also receive things in dreams, which I have. So that's been the privilege of being open to different modalities. That's the thing that you all need to know, that art and culture is nothing unless it's practiced. And if you practice are not afraid. See, that's another thing. Martina and I being Western trained, I remember the first dream I got. I was so afraid of it. And I went, what am I supposed to do with this? I created an image and I didn't even name it. It was a painting I did in the 80s. And once I got over that, I just went, wow, the name of this piece is Ulupo. And in my backyard in Kailua is a heiau named Ulupo. So there's no accident. You know, the Kūpuna, our Aumakua are all speaking to us in forms that all you have to do is open your eye and go, oh my God, there's a wind that just came up when I was talking about tutu. Or, you know, there are aspects of our belief system that are so connected to the land. So I love what the question. The guidance is so pono, and it's not to be feared. And for Martina and I, we also have Kūpuna, right? And kumu, like my beloved kumu, Hale Makua, John Keola Lake. living now is wonderful Auntie Lynette Paglinawan and Kumumalina Kalukukui. There are so many teachers that we all have that we refer to, that we go back to, like Kekuni Blaisdell. He was very pilina to our family as well. And like my cousin Emmett, we all are there for each other. Martina, you want to share about guidance from Alma Kua?
Yeah, I was thinking, you know, as I explained, I was very Western trained, and so when I first started learning about our history, and you know, and I'd kind of heard about this trauma term, and I was trying to this intergenerational trauma term, and I was trying to understand it, and I was in the middle of my busy clinical day seeing patients, and the nurse knocked on the door and said, you know, your friend says she wants to speak with you urgently when you have a minute. So finished up with the patient, called her up, said, what's up? And she said, President Clinton signed the apology bill. And I just started sobbing. And I couldn't stop. It took me about 15 minutes, and the sobbing came from deep. I mean, I had never experienced that before, that deep. And it took me a while to realize that it was my ancestors that were crying. And that really gave me the motivation to say, we have to do something about this. We can't keep going the way we're going, and I have to do something. So that was one thing that I can relate. I think being part, and along that journey then comes Ahahui no Kauka, and through Ahahui no Kauka, I'm exposed to Kumuleke Spal and the Paglinawans, and then I was able and blessed to bring the Paglinawans to Jabsum to talk about Ho'oponopono, and Melina's part of our teaching team, Kalulukukui, and so yes, so many kumus. There's so much. When we present on the work we do at Jabsum, we call it community as classroom, because we take them out. They get dirty. They're in the lo'i. They're hauling rocks. A pai ohe. Yeah, I mean, they need this experiential learning to really understand. So I'm so blessed that the community welcomes us and is willing to give their time to try to teach the students. And I think that they understand that we have to all get out of our silos, as Meleanna talks about a lot, and work together if we want to really bring wellness to our people. And when we bring wellness to our people, that's going to expand out beyond Native Hawaiians to everyone in the world, even. Yeah. So
I think this question could be to both of you. How do you choose what mo'olelo to bring forth and teach? So maybe for you, Dr. Kamaka, you know, when you do that historical, you know, what things do you focus on? And then also for you, Meleanna, when you guys were creating that piece, like, how did you decide which mo'olelo to actually put on the canvas?
Do you want to go first, Meleanna, or you want me to?
Okay, good question. Actually, I'm glad for the question. It's a very important one. I would say that what's ended up happening for us is the work presents itself. We all are versed culturally, and as we work, we also started from the right instead of the left, because again, we want to reorient people. It doesn't, you know, Eastern culture, everything is written and read from the right to left. So as we orient, we also in this work have oriented that way, and just honoring traditional practices that have come before. It's been a very fluid thing, because as artists working together, it's a very extraordinary process. You just kind of have to get out of the way because people are working so fast, and not stop that flow. So, you know, if we're talking about our past, of course, we're going to be talking about Haloa na Kalau Kapalili, our plants and our connection to our images and our prayers, our creation mythology and our ancestors. So all of those things just appeared out of the paper, so to speak, because people would put them in there, and others would go, yeah, that works. This is a story, the mo'olelo that continues. But I have to say, we had the whole moon cycle in there where the umeke were to the left of the bird, and it didn't work. So, as po'o for the project, I had to determine, well, we're going to have to use something different that holds the energy, but allows for things to be held within. And that's where this little umeke came in, because the umeke hold our traditions, our protocols, our waters. And then it became that circular piece. And that's why it's reminiscent of the moon. So that's actually a really good question. Your intuition, your noʻeau, tells you what to do if you're an artist and if you're smart enough to listen. Now, I can't say that for those doctors, so maybe Dr. Kamaka will share something else.
Yeah, so the beauty is my students get exposed to this kind of ʻIke and noʻeau that was just shared. But for me, as a Western trained faculty at a medical school, I had to make sure that the students had a basic understanding of history. Many of our students, 4th grade Hawaiian history, what kind of understanding of the overthrow do you have? I also had to make sure that they understand that we come from strength. We come from an incredibly amazing, strong culture, and we were scientists. So that's another important part of the story. So we talk about wayfinding, we talk about resource management. This is all science-based. It's observation and questioning and repetition and validation. This is science. Our ancestors did science. So I try to make them, so they don't see a Hawaiian and they think, oh, diabetes and hypertension, they think all the bad, poor, right? I want them to think of us as people that with some incredible strengths that they can tap into when they try to come up with treatment plans for our patients. So it's like, yeah, is there a lo'i kalo in your neighborhood that you could go and work in? Is there a community Saturday that your holo Hana can go and help? So these are the getting our people reconnected to culture and ʻāina is really important if we want to get them to heal. It's not just the medicines that I give you for your hypertension. And then understanding the overthrow, that's really us rediscovering our history. There's so much we didn't know, and there was so much misinformation. So I think it's really important for the students to understand why there's anger in the Hawaiian. Why are those Hawaiians angry? Why are we fighting so hard over Mauna Kea and Red Hill and develop? Why are we fighting? And I need them to understand that. So those are some of the kind of historical mo'olelo that I try to make sure are included, as well as sort of the beautiful mo'olelo from within our culture that Kumu Meleanna just shared.
What's exciting, everyone, is that each of us can sort of dive deeply into our own cultural and past and historical past, because unfortunately there's so much of this that is similar. So I think for the two of us, the question from Pua was, how do you bring forth and teach these things? Well, you find the opportunity through symbols to talk about, like kalo with with the poi pounder, as in a symbolic reference, right? So there are so many successes that our community has had, but we've also had so many drawbacks because of the historical traumas that have happened because of the U.S. taking of our lands. We're an occupied country. I know that's hard for people to understand, but the more we talk about it, the better understanding we will have for people being sick and displaced and under educated and things. It isn't as if, I'm convinced people don't want to be in those states. And that's why this notion of maika po maika oya i'o, it's coming to understand the truth and getting out of ignorance and becoming educated and finding your passions, in your practice. And it doesn't mean necessarily having to go to college, but it means finding what you love to do, being the best mechanic, being the best firefighter, being the best engineer, being the best mahi'ai, because everything is honorable if you do the work and reclaim it for yourself culturally. I deeply believe that. I just happen to be an artist, you know, and I'm glad the arts are respected in some places, but we certainly need a lot of schools. The question is, how do you bring it forth? You make access. You give access to the arts in all of the schools. Why should only the private schools have art all the time? It's not fair. So let's get the arts and education everywhere. That's the point. Thank you.
Yeah. And on a positive note, there too, even in medical schools, humanities courses are popping up more and more. It's that recognition that of the importance of the arts in wellness and health. So it's not only for our elementary schools, it's for all of us and to our adult education. That's why you guys are here today too. I thought this question in the chat was really interesting. I want to see how you'd like to answer this, Meleanna. I'm sorry, I just have to. What would you say about our trauma? What would you say that our trauma, cultural pain, will determine our path or our purpose? So.
Oh, that's a good question. That's a very good question. Yikes! You want to get that first, Martina? I could think about it a little longer.
I jumped in because I want to make sure you answer.
Okay. Well, all I can say is, I think to understand what we've lost and what we can regain, because I believe in reclamation, and that spirit has always been constant and has never left us. So that will determine our path and our purpose. And I think the question is path or purpose. It could be both. And understanding what has come in the past will give us strength to have the passion, the desire, the purpose to go forward. That's so important. But it doesn't have to be, our path or our purpose. I find both of those the same. And I think as long as we see the multiplicity of things, we can do the work that's purposeful and positive. I think, we can only go one direction because the planet is going the other direction, given everything that's going on. And unless we make drastic changes together, then we can all, nalovali together. And that would be so sad. Martina, how would you like to answer that question?
I think you answered it perfectly. And I just want to remind that when you pull together spirituality and cultural strengths with transformation, can't stop us.
We have the capacity. We just have to have the will, and we're in very, very traumatic, terrible times throughout the world. And the systems are churning and turning. So you have to know they're all coming down because they're not working. So the fact that we're able to share the wisdom of our Kūpuna, our elders, is a blessing because we're returning to the best of who we are. I just love that. I think that's really deep. Eden, are there any other questions you want us to answer?
I think there's one more from Linny, and it says health disparity for Native Hawaiian compared to the last 20 or so years. Are we closing the gap? And then my assumption is they work in the field of 0 to 5 population in helping to close the gap. So I know you spoke about the 3 ways of healing. How might that be done for families and for those with early learners?
I'm going to be very quick on this and just say it is the kuleana of our parents and our Kūpuna, because we have to love ourselves enough back into good health. The systems as they are, they have wanted us to be dependent on things outside of ourselves. And what I know is the disparity comes from us not understanding who we are and using our resources and our strengths and our capacity to wellness, to work towards wellness. So I have to say, this 0 to 5, these programs are fantastic. And we close the gap by the parents giving the ono to the keiki at a very young age. We're all needing to know that we have the kuleana to take care of our keiki. Nobody else does. And we're lucky when these programs do help, because they are additions, not something that is a gap. There is no gap. There are no gaps when you're taking care of your keiki. So that is a maka'ala to all parents, because I deeply believe that. And I know we're all working and things, but I was widowed with a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. So let me tell you, if anybody can talk about gaps, I can talk to you about gaps. So I want to say that it's my lifetime commitment to my children and my mo'opuna that really has made a difference. So how about you, Martina?
Yeah, I just wanted to throw, it was brilliant. I'm glad I had you start. You're brilliantly said. I just want to put a little plug in. Well, directly answering the first question, no, we have not closed the gaps, sadly. And in fact, in some cases, they're widening, particularly if we look at our youth. If we look at now, our kids have hypertension and type 2 diabetes and obesity rates. And so no, the gaps are widening. And everybody says this is the first generation that will die younger than the parents' generation. You know, the history has been each generation lives longer. This is the first generation that's going to differ. So there's a lot of work for us to do. But tapping into this ancestral knowledge, this ʻIke, this will help. I want to put a plug in right now for Papa Ololokahi has, they have a weekly seminar coming out right now on the Eola Mau report, which is an update from the 1986 Eola Mau report, which was like an eye-opener for most of us in the community, as far as not even realizing that we had these health disparities until this report came out. So the Eola Mau report is an update. So if you're interested in this whole disparity, each week covers a different section of the report. So there's dental health, mental health, nutrition, medical. So I highly recommend check out their website, Papa Ololokahi, and you can get some information on that. Sorry, I guess we must be running out of time.
Well, sadly we are. Mahalo nui, Meleanna and Dr. Kamaka, but this is not the end of our conversation, because you can join us again tomorrow morning, Saturday, for an extended, deeper dive into healing trauma and some hands-on activities at our Saturday workshop. And it's open to anybody. And there are some supplies that you will need to bring with you tomorrow. So we're asking, if you do join us tomorrow, to take a deeper dive into these concepts and these ideas and this conversation, then please bring with you an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, some pens, some colored markers, some crayons, and some scissors, and the conversation can continue. Anything to add to that, Meleanna or Dr. Kamaka?
Just mahalo for this time. And, you know, I just learned an oli, and it's a really heavy oli that it's short, but I'm wondering if I should wait. I might just wait till tomorrow, because it's a big energy. But the systems are falling everywhere, whether it's economic, educational, political, you know, nation state in the world. So we can either be terrified by all of it, or we can be delighted and challenged. And I think as a creative, there's always a little terror in the newness of things, or fear. But I refuse to let fear take me and hold me. So that's why I offer tomorrow an opportunity for us to do a deeper dive into this work, because it's through being creative that we can actually heal ourselves and one another. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. We hope you'll join us tomorrow. It's the same Zoom link, 9 a.m. We'll be here. Bring your art supplies and an open heart, open mind. We'd love for you to join us. So thank you so much. Don't forget, we have lunch time Mele coming up at 12:05. We have a wonderful group of musicians that will be playing live. You can join on by going back to that webinar link, the main summit link, and join in the room there and just eat your lunch and listen to some beautiful music. And we thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for sharing your ʻIke with us, Meleanna and Dr. Kamaka. And we look forward to joining you again tomorrow morning. Aloha.
Nui ke aloha. Ahui ho.
Mahalo.